December 7th. First order of business would be the roll call.
Shear?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
Berardi?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Frankel?
Here.
Stylen?
Here.
Arthur?
Here.
Okay, it looks like we're all present. I have two quick orders of business to cover before we get to the regular meeting. There'll be no council update tonight. Teresa Kohlhoff had another meeting. And if anybody's here for LU 2030, that has been postponed till our first meeting in January. So with that, we'll move right to the findings. Our first finding is AP 2020 TR 499-20-02981, a request for approval of type 2 tree application to remove a tulip poplar trees, both 53 inches in diameter, breast height, for landscaping purposes. Have you all reviewed that finding?
Yes.
Is there a motion to accept or?
Make the motion, but I had a slight edit I wanted to make, if I could, which is on page 5, lines 1 and 2. I just think it would be, just grammatically, it says this commission as well as the council, which the commission is bound to follow its decisions in interpreting the code. I just would suggest we say which council decisions the commission is bound to follow when interpreting the code. And then I noticed on line 8 of page 5, the last phrase of that line says, and not tree removal criteria. I think that should read, are not, A-R-E, not tree removal criteria.
Oh. Wait. Yeah.
Somebody else? Or are you done, Randy?
I thought I had something else, but I'm not finding it right now. So yes, I'm finished, and I would suggest with those modifications, I would move to approve if there are no other modifications to these findings.
I guess my question is, is Evan good with that? The first point was kind of a legalese change, right?
Yeah. Could you read that again for me, Mr. Arthur?
Yes. So I'm looking at page 5, lines 1 and 2, which now reads, this commission, as well as the council, comma, which the commission is bound to follow its decisions in interpreting the code, comma. And I was suggesting we simply say, this commission, comma, as well as the council, comma, which council decisions the commission is bound to follow when interpreting the code. It just seemed like it was ungrammatical.
Okay. Yes, fine.
I'll second it then.
So moved. So I will poll the commission. David?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Mark? Mark?
AWOL.
Okay. Shear, yes.
You didn't call me, but I'll say yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, Craig.
Yep.
All right, it passes. So the next item of business is AP 20-08. This was also a type 2 tree permit to remove 2 Douglas firs. Are there any comments on these findings?
I did have a comment.
Randy?
Thank you. The same correction on page 5, lines 23 to 24, where I would suggest it would read better to say, this commission, as well as the council, which council decision the commission is bound to follow when interpreting the code, would read better, and I would make that suggestion. And then I did have one other. On page 4, the very last line, after line 26 and the next line, talking about the applicant's allergies, saying the applicant did not provide evidence demonstrating that these specific trees are the cause of his condition. And I just thought the applicant had said he wanted to submit a letter from a doctor, and the commission did not allow him to do that. So I think it's questionable in my mind that we should have that sentence in there. So I would suggest taking it out and the other changes if the chair would entertain that.
I would entertain that. Any objections? Hearing none, I would. Evan?
Evan's talking.
Well, I was just going to, Jessica, what was the status on that? I mean, he submitted it to Jessica Maury Collins, but it didn't make the record. Did he submit it at the hearing? You recall?
His doctor's letter? Is that what you're talking?
Yeah.
No, he submitted it to Miss Maury Collins, and she inadvertently forgot to include it in the record. So it was never in the record as part of the application. And he did, and
Okay, but he had the opportunity for the record, and he didn't introduce it at the hearing.
correct.
So,
I think his testimony at the hearing was that he wanted to submit it, but had been told, I recall him saying that he had been told by staff that he could not submit it or they didn't include it.
No, actually what happened was we contacted, it was a letter from his doctor, and so he submitted it to us, and so Jessica called him back and said, this is a letter from your doctor, do you want to include this in a record? It's personal information. And he said yes, but unfortunately, it wasn't on purpose, but she just forgot to include it in the record.
well, I think striking the sentence is fine. I mean, the ultimate finding here is that allergies is not within the scope of overgrown landscape area or landscape plan. I think you're correct. Thank you.
I'm fine with the adjustments. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve the findings and recommendation.
I'll second.
Kat, do you want to take the roll?
Shearer,
Yes.
Holson,
Yes.
Doherty,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Frankel,
Yes.
Silent,
Yes.
Arthur.
Yes.
Okay. So now we move on to our public hearing. Our public hearing tonight is LU 20-0013, a request for a development review permit for a new multifamily building in downtown redevelopment district. The site is located at 516, 518, and 530 4th Street, designated as 21E03DC01800 and 21E03DC01900. The staff coordinator is Joanna Hasty, senior planner. Evan?
Sorry, I'll read the procedure now. Apologies. This is a land use request which is to be considered based upon the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria and that staff identified in the request. It was available online. You must identify any applicable criteria you believe applies. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the applicable criteria. Please specify, as you testify to the commission, the criteria or standards you are addressing, so the commission may consider the testimony in relation to the criteria or standards. If you do not identify the criteria or standards you are addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you are addressing and testifying about, and the commission may not consider your testimony in its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The public hearing process will be as follows. First, there'll be a presentation by staff, then testimony by the applicant up to 20 minutes. then testimony by parties in support of the application, followed by testimony by parties opposed to the application, and finally testimony by those neither for nor against the application. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, except to the applicant, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Recognized neighborhood associations, homeowner associations, government or government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following that would be the applicant's rebuttal up to 5 minutes, and then commission deliberation, including a statement to the applicant by the commission of proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the commission's conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. Now, because we're participating in a virtual hearing electronically, following testimony by all persons that have signed up to speak and the applicant's rebuttal, I will ask whether any person requests a continuance of the hearing in order to submit any additional evidence or testimony. You may request a continuance by, if you are on Zoom and testifying, either at the end of your testimony or at the conclusion of all testimony. I will ask if anybody requests a continuance. At that time, unmute and request a continuance. Or if you're not on Zoom and watching on YouTube, please call Kat Klug at 503-635-0286 and leave your name and contact information with Kat Klug. Or 3, you may email her at kkluge@lakeoswego.city with your name and contact information. You should be aware that YouTube is about a minute or two behind live. The time limits do not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of or which are part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. It is assumed that persons are testifying in their own behalf unless they express to identify the recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government or government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization they are representing. A potential conflict of interest declared on behalf of each of the DRC members to the extent of their business or employment, which each will identify. Unless declared otherwise, the respective DRC member does not have a known, present, or anticipated future business relationship with the project or the applicant. It is possible that a future business relationship could arise in the initiation, design, construction, or maintenance of the project through either the employment or business of the DRC member personally, or through relatives defined in ORS 244-020. At this point, I would ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, if you have any bias on the application, if you have any financial conflicts of interest, and please state your business or employment. Chair Scheer, if you'll go ahead and declare and then poll the commission.
Thank you, Evan. My name is Jeff Scheer. I'm a retired contractor. I have had no ex parte contact. I have no conflict of interest, no bias, and no financial conflicts. I do know the developer Ray Derby. We've known each other for 25 years and actually lived in the same neighborhood for a while, but that shouldn't have any bearing on my decision on this project. David.
Yes, my name is David Polson. I'm a civil engineer. I've had a chance to visit the site, and I've had no ex parte contacts. I have no financial conflicts of interest, and I have no biases.
Thank you, David. Kirk. Let's see, Kirk. Okay, we'll come back to Kirk.
No, how about me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. My name is Kirk Smith. I'm a real estate attorney with the law firm of Bullcoulter Peter Wynn. I have not visited the site. I have no ex parte contacts. I do not have any biases, but I do need to let everyone know that I purchased a home from Blazer Homes that resulted in litigation in which I and my family were the plaintiffs, Blazer Homes, and we were ultimately settled the matter. So I need to let everyone know that. My law firm, Bullcoulter Peter Wynn, ran a conflicts check based on the information brought by the provided to me by the city. During that conflicts check, I determined that OTEC is a client of ours, And I just wanted to disclose that OTEC is a current client of Buckhalter Peter Wynn.
Kirk, do you don't work on that account, or do you?
I do leasing work for OTEC intermittently. We do a lot of their corporate work, but our firm's not handling anything with respect to this project.
Either of these conflicts cloud your decision making on this issue?
No.
Thank you. Jason?
Jason Frankel, Key Bank branch manager right here in Lake Oswego. I have not done a site visit. I have no other ex parte contact, no bias, and no financial conflict.
Thanks, Jason. Randy?
Good evening. I'm Randy Arthur. I'm a civil litigation attorney for the Portland, Oregon law firm of Bullenhauser Bailey PC. I did cause a conflicts check to be run and found no client conflicts that would be disqualifying based on the information provided by the city. I, at one time, had hired a designer who had an office on this site, Leslie Aiken, with whom I have had a friendship. And but I have no financial interest in the project and have had no ex parte contacts. I've not made a site visit, although I frequent the post office, which I believe is across the street from this site. So I have observed the site from a distance, and I have no disqualifying prejudice.
Thank you, Randy. Mark?
My name is Mark Silent. I'm a local business owner. I have no ex parte contacts. I have not made a site visit. I have no bias, and I have no financial conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mark. Craig?
My name's Craig Berardi. I'm a financial consultant. I have no ex parte contacts, no bias, no conflicts of interest. I've driven by that site when dropping stuff off at the post office, but not visited the site itself.
Thank you, Craig. Evan?
Thank you. Kat, have all interested parties, are they admitted into the Zoom room or are they in the holding room?
Everyone is admitted in the room except for Carol, who is going to testify.
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask if there is any challenge to a commissioner's right to consider the application. You can do that either by stating now if you're in the Zoom, or if you're waiting to testify, then please state the objection at the start of your testimony. Is there any objection to a commissioner's right to consider the application for those that are in the main Zoom?
Okay.
Hearing none. Hearing none, then Johanna Hasty with the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. Johanna Hasty, Senior Planner with the City of Lake Oswego. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I am here tonight to present LU 20-0013. I have a couple of exhibits to add to the record. I have 3 emails that were received this morning, public testimony. The first one, Exhibit G1, was an email neither for nor against, and it raised a couple of issues, including congestion on the alley, enforcing building codes, and issues that the commenter had about her own residence. The only applicable issue for tonight is the alley congestion. And as you've seen in the staff report, the city engineer reviewed the site, looked at the applicant's trip generation memo. The site is currently developed with a commercial buildings and 1 apartment. The city engineer did impose minimal right-of-way improvements commensurate with the use. Other than that, I am not going to talk about the right-of-way improvements. The next 2 exhibits are exhibits G200 and 201. Those were emails in opposition. They raised issues regarding parking, spillover parking, design and massing of the structure, negative impacts on the neighborhood, and other more minor issues. All of these will be addressed in the presentation, in my presentation. So as described, this is a development review permit for a 15-unit multifamily housing project in the Downtown Redevelopment Design District. This does include the removal of 5 trees along the front of the property, but I do want to note that no variances were requested as a part of this application, which is a little unusual in the Downtown Redevelopment Design District, which I'm going to call the DRD from this point forward. The site is located in the EC zone, the East End Commercial Zone. It is, like I said, in the overlay district, as are all abutting properties. To the north and south and east, properties are zoned EC as well and are developed with a mix of single family. Also to the west, the property is in the EC zone. To the west, the property is developed with a single family. To the north with townhomes. To the east with the US Post Office. And to the south with a small commercial building. Also to the west is a property zoned R2, and that is developed with a duplex. The EC zone dimensional standards are pretty straightforward, and except for one issue, the project fully complies. For the setbacks, all are exceeded or met or exceeded on all sides. Lot coverage is allowed at 100%. The applicant is proposing 85%. Floor area is a ratio of site size, it's 3:1. The site is 12,000 square feet in area, therefore the applicant is allowed 36,000 square feet in floor area, which they are proposing. The only issue that was subject to a condition of approval was the height, and I do have a slide that further illustrates this, but the applicant mistakenly allowed the height to be measured off of one point rather than following the grade of the site. So in the southeast corner, the 60-foot height limit is exceeded a little bit. And there's a condition of approval to modify that as a part of the building permit review. The applicant was made aware of this issue and let me know that they didn't foresee any problems with revising the height to comply. If people do have questions about if the commission does have questions about the EC height limits, I am happy to answer that. It is a ratio. And again, just to clarify, the height for the structure on this property is 60 feet. So really high level analysis of the development standards, because this is a straightforward project in my opinion. So I'm just gonna breeze through these. If you have any questions, I can delve into it a little bit further. Minimum parking on this site is a function of how many units there are and how many bedrooms are in each unit. After parking modifiers, the minimum for this project is 17 spaces, and the applicant is providing 27, including 4 on-street parking spaces along the 4th Avenue frontage. The driveway meets the slope, cross slope, and landing requirements. That driveway does lead into the underground parking facility where most of the on-site parking is provided, where all of the on-site parking is provided, I should say. Stormwater was reviewed by the city's contract engineer and found to be feasible with conditions of approval. It will be fully managed on site. And then finally, there is a small issue with a fence here along the south property line. It is the abutting commercial owner's fence. It's 6 feet tall all the way to the alley right of way, which does not comply with the AASHTO site distance requirements for existing on-site development, both for this site and the abutting site, and for the future driveway. That fence issue is being managed separate from this land use application. The city's engineering department is in communication with that abutting property owner to have them revise or remove the height to comply. It has to be a maximum of 30 inches in height from the property line abutting the alley at 15 feet back. And again, there's a condition of approval in the staff report that they have to show that the issue has been resolved prior to issuance of the building permit because of where this driveway is located, but it is being handled separate from this application. The next 3 slides are going to look at the Downtown Redevelopment Design District standards. Really quickly, looking at building siding and massing. The first section requires complex massing. And as you've seen in the perspective drawings and the elevations, this project does include complex massing. The design is asymmetrical both vertically and horizontally, and it's emphasized through the use of changes in materials, fenestration patterns, and colors. The roof form is very complex and it consists of a main gable roof form with hipped and shed roof forms incorporated into it. The height issue, as noted here, from what you can see with these red lines, is the applicant mistakenly held the height maximum from the northeast corner. It was held all across the site and the maximum height didn't drop down where the existing grade dropped down. So there's just a small portion of this roof here that exceeds the maximum height. I wasn't able to fully calculate how much, but eyeballing it, it looks like about 2 feet that it'd have to be dropped. And it's just this portion of the roof, possibly a small portion of the gable that goes east-west behind that chimney. The next section for the DRD overlay district looks at building design. This proposal is for arts and crafts, similar to the abutting townhome development to the north. The arts and crafts standards, arts and crafts style, excuse me, does include a specific list of architectural elements that make it characteristic. These are included, all included in this project, including steeply pitched and intersecting gable roof forms with lots of dormers, prominent chimneys, asymmetrical composition with porches and upper floor decks, sash windows with small panes on all of these windows, and brick and shingle and board and batten siding, a combination that are very characteristic of the arts and crafts style. The proposed windows are compatible with the arts and crafts style, again, as pointed out with the fenestration pattern and the moldings. The base, as required, is masonry. It's a brick. The upper stories are also, there's a change in material. They are fiber cement board, however you say that, shingles, and then board and batten. There was a question earlier about whether or not fake wood, if you will, is allowed, and it is in the DRD. It's not a prohibited material. As long as it has the appearance of wood, it is allowed. And then finally, all of the mechanical equipment, except for an underground transformer in the back corner, all of the mechanical equipment will be located on the roof surrounded by roof forms, which is in compliance with the DRD standards. Finally, with the DRD, I want to look at landscape and site design. For multifamily, 15% of the site is required to be set aside, and the applicant is providing 15.2%. The landscape design is linear and layered in a way that complements the architectural style of the building. New street trees along 4th Street are included, along with an art pedestal, and the applicant has worked with the Arts Council to figure out the best location for that. As also required, the applicant is incorporating a brick herringbone accent panel where in the public sidewalk where it abuts the main walkway into the 4th Avenue entrance. And the front of the landscape area, or the front of the site where it's landscaped, the landscaping is created with a series of landscape walls, the lower of which is created out of Columbia River basalt, as is required by the code. So staff does find that the proposal outright complies with all of the DRD standards. Finally, I want to look really briefly at tree removal. As I noted in my staff report, the applicant's narrative did reference 6 trees, but one of those trees has already been issued a permit, the dead tree in the southeast corner of the site. With this application, we looked at the 5 remaining trees for removal. So the removal, the applicant deemed necessary for construction of both the public sidewalk along 4th Street and for the construction of the actual building. The 2 trees in the upper right-hand corner and the northeast corner are already lifting the public sidewalk. Replacement of that sidewalk would definitely impact at least 50%, if not more, of their critical root zone. The same can be said for the 2 trees in the center of the site. Their critical root zones are impacted on both sides, first from the building and then on the other side from the new sidewalk or the replaced sidewalk. And then finally, the last tree on the site is fully within the building footprint. Staff concurs with the applicant that this is a constrained site. there is only a 5-foot landscape buffer required along the 4th Avenue frontage. The applicant has exceeded that by putting most of the landscaping in this area. But in any case, this is a very narrow area, and with impacts on both sides, it would be impossible to preserve those trees as is. And so any alternate site plan would require a reduction in the size of the building, which would mean a reduction in the number of units. So staff concurs that there isn't a reasonable alternative development as allowed by the zone, and believes that the applicant's proposal complies with the type 2 tree removal criteria. 8 mitigation trees, not including the required street trees, will be required, and will finalize the species and locations as a part of the building permit. So again, pretty high level review, but this is a straightforward application. So I am recommending approval as conditioned in the staff report. Of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. And let me know if you want me to stop sharing the screen.
Thank you, Joanna. Are there any questions, gentlemen?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Joanna.
Hi.
Thanks for that presentation. How much conversation was there regarding having a 4th floor and the scale of the building compared to the new buildings that are, I think they're on the north side, the other apartments there adjacent?
So as I said in my email to you this morning, the townhomes to the north were subject to a different height standard. And so they had a range because of their proximity to the R6 zone. They had a range in height of 35 to 45 feet. So they could only go up to 3 stories. This particular site and this structure did meet the maximum height of the EC zone, the 60-foot height. And it was, the 4th story was always a part of the proposal. I did have a number of back and forth conversations back when we were able to meet in person with the applicant's team and their architects. And we discussed how to minimize the appearance of that 4th story. And it does meet the DRD requirements for a 4th story, in that it is fully residential. It is encased and enclosed in a roof form. It is also stepped back from the floors below. And sorry, I have to go let my cat in. He's yelling at me, sorry. Starts tearing things apart when he doesn't get his way. Apologies. So yeah, we did a whole back and forth about the 4th story and the massing. I also got Sid Sin with Laura involved in this, and he took a look at the plans. He suggested, after the application was submitted, he suggested modifying what were, let me pull up the, oops. Modifying the gables along the front here, these 2 front gables or dormers. They were initially steeply pitched dormers, gable dormers. He suggested modifying them to a shed dormer in order to kind of minimize that 4th story a little bit more. And so this is, the applicant voluntarily chose to do that when they resubmitted. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It just seems to me that, that last picture there definitely wasn't to scale, because this thing will be massively taller than the buildings next door. But okay, thank you.
Anybody else have questions for Joanna?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, go, David.
The south face looks kind of blank to me. Is that anticipation of what's going to be on the corner of B Street and 4th? If there's a future building there that also would have a 60-foot height to it? That
site would be allowed a 60-foot height. And yeah, because of firewall complications, they couldn't put any windows in that on that facade. We did work with them a little bit on the design to try and, sorry, cat.
Go ahead. I have a dog.
So unprofessional, jeez. Ridiculous. Okay, question, south wall facade. Yeah, so the setbacks along this property line, EC to EC property, is 0. So they chose to build, for the most part, that entire wall right at the 0 setback. And so there was a firewall issue there. But we did work with them to try and we have this recession here in the building. We do have the lower story porches here where you have that accent along that change in floor. We also worked with the railing on the upper floor to try and break up that wall plane a little bit. But when the site next door does redevelop, it will likely develop at the property line at a similar height, given how most properties will develop.
In the meantime, you know, if people driving up and down B Street, which is a heavily traveled road, they're going to see that blank wall. I mean, I did see a projection of the adjacent existing building onto this building, and I think it'll cover up, if I'm not mistaken, it might cover up that white cornice there, the lattice work there. But other than that, they're just, you know, on top of that existing building, all you'll see is those big blank walls. So, yeah, you're right. There's a couple windows there, but it just, you know, I know what you're telling me about firewall issues, but what did the code say about, you know, fenestration and things like that?
Well, it does require fenestration and wood on upper stories. This is not a clear and objective project. It's it's under the discretionary path. So there isn't a minimal fenestration requirement. Oh. It's kind of it's a hazard of being the first to develop on a site where you have an abutting commercial site. I would have hated to see something like fake windows put on there just for visual interest. There might be a change in material, like exterior cladding material, that could be incorporated to break up the plane a little bit more. I didn't require it of the applicant, again, just with that future in mind, that any sort of fenestration, even if they were allowed to put it in, or any sort of material change, would eventually be lost.
Okay, well, I don't think people are going to like it, but I guess it's unavoidable. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Joanna? Seeing none, we'll move on to the applicant. Evan?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Just one moment.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Brady, we can hear you. And I haven't Boone here. I'm a timekeeper. So I will notify you. You have 20 minutes. And I'll notify you orally 1 minute prior.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. My name is Kevin Brady. I'm a senior planner with OTAC. I'm here with our applicant team. Gary Reddick is our architect on the team, a head architect. We also have Ray and Rick with Blazer Homes. And I believe Kristen, yeah, there's Kristen. Kristen Ballou is our engineer. So we have our whole team here ready to answer any questions you might have. Before we get Gary started on the presentation of the building, I just wanted to point out a little bit about the process that got us to where we are tonight. It's been a long and involved process, but it's been really beneficial, I think, to the project and the building. We started off with a typical pre-app, but we got some really good feedback in the pre-app, and we took that to heart, and we came back with a second pre-app. We also went and had a separate meeting with the neighborhood representative for trees. We had our neighborhood meeting, further informing our design. So we learned a lot in this process. This process is really important for us. And then we had another meeting. We had a meeting with Carol Ockert and one of her colleagues with the neighborhood. And so I just wanted to point out that, this process has been really important for us. We listened and we got a lot of great feedback and we learned a lot about the neighborhood and the neighborhood issues. So I just wanted to point that out. I think it's important to make note of that the process, though it was a little bit challenging and there were some things that, made us make some changes that we weren't necessarily looking at initially. We feel like it made it a much better project. So just wanted to point that out. And then now I'll turn it over to, and I looks like I can share my screen right down here. Is that okay to share my screen now?
Sure.
Okay, I'll do that. And then I'll have Gary Reddick sit down and give you a presentation on the building.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, you can't see me, I guess, and I can't see you, but I want to just tag on a little bit to Kevin's comments, and I'm going to quickly get into the building. I've had a lot of history over the years of working with Lake Oswego and have developed a real healthy respect for the vision of the town, and it's exemplified in your design goals and design standards. And you all know they're fairly prescriptive and have a lot of detail. And so we had a lot of hands touch this project during the design phases, and a lot of that centered on the arts and crafts style. And we were determined from the outset to do at least two things. One was to stay within the code and produce a true arts and crafts building. And the amount of research and collaboration here was quite amazing, down to the finest details, some of which I can't, I won't be able to illustrate this evening, but it's a piece of work that the entire office is really proud of. So you're looking down on a straight down shot on the site plan with 4th Street at the bottom of the picture, sidewalk, a planter strip from
Gary,
the sidewalk to.
We do not see this, Gary.
You cannot see this.
No. We all have plans, we could refer to it.
Well, we got some really clean images put together here today.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay, there we go.
You got it now?
Yep.
Everybody see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're looking straight down 4th Street in the foreground, working your way up, sidewalk, planter strip, a couple of elevated planters. The brick you can see extending out the herringbone pattern into the sidewalk, the steps up to the front door. If we swing over to the right side of the plan, we have a low angle ADA ramp that comes up to a secondary entrance at about mid building between us and the existing building to the north. You're seeing a typical layout on the floor, at least for the first floor, for units. I'm just pointing out the major features here. The other is the ramp off the alleyway in the upper left-hand corner. And in the upper right-hand corner is a long rectangular room that is the garbage and recycling, and double doors then that take that out to the alley on pickup day. What do I do to get the next image? I'm going to take a little bit of time on this front elevation because it really encompasses all of the features that we were trying to incorporate in the design. And I'm just going to list them. And if you can see my cursor, I'll try to tell you where I'm pointing to. But we were interested, as is the arts and crafts style, in a discernible base, middle, and top. And I don't think there's any, it's quite clear and strong. We have arts and crafts style is characterized by a strong gabled roof form. And in this case, Joanna pointed out 2 dormers. We've got another gable form here over the front entry, and that wall is set back from the face. So this is not straight across. We've had a lot of modeling and carving into the facade to create that 3D interest. The upper roof forms extend at the top floor out to cover wraparound verandas on both upper corners. And so, you know, we were after a very strong clarity of form and structure. We've got exposed beams and trellises, strong posts. Those posts are supported by tapered brick supports, which is another strong feature of arts and crafts style. I failed to mention up at the roof, we have a strong chimney shapes. Those chimneys are also slightly tapered and have multiple flues, all characteristics of arts and crafts. We have a major front porch at the entry. And as Joanna pointed out, we have a variety of materials on the exterior, with the predominant material being shingles, which is the predominant characteristic exterior material for arts and crafts. Horizontal lines are a big deal in arts and crafts style. And so the introduction of this white trellis on both sides, the strong shadow line created by the overhangs on all levels has a lot of horizontality to it. And we've cantilevered the second floor a couple feet beyond the first floor, which again is a strong characteristic of arts and crafts. And we've done that again between the third floor and the fourth floor, if you follow my cursor back into that setback. Almost all of the panes, if not all of them, are multi-paned. It's not a paste-on strip. These are real windows and accentuated in all cases with trim. I'm going to move around the building quickly now. I'm flipping clear around to the alley side. You see all of these same characteristics, even though on the alley, even though it's, you know, not what you'd call the strong view side of the building, we took no less care with it in terms of materiality, with trellising, with railing, with setbacks, and strong building forms. What you're seeing here is the rooftop with a railing going around for a rooftop deck. Looking at the two sides, this is the north elevation. Here you can see the wall enclosing the ramp coming up from the sidewalk to an entry here. Introduction of another trellis again on that side wall. We have some of the same issues here as we had on the south side in terms of amount of windows relative to the property line. But you can see we're hipping the roof back here, and all of that shape then is enclosing the smaller footprint unit that is on the fourth floor. Going to the south side, and this was visited on a few minutes ago. I'm not sure there's much more, you know, I need to talk about. But again, you know, up at the midpoint and above, no less care in the detailing and the crafting of these roof shapes and their brackets and turning back. And so the roof form here and out here is coming out over a covered terrace. I want to zoom in a bit on the back on the 4th Street elevation. If you look at it now, you can appreciate a little bit more of the amount of character and detail and change of the material. We have that basaltic stone as a planter edge along the sidewalk. We have a 5-foot planting strip between the sidewalk and that stone wall. We step back for another planter and now start to introduce the real base of the building, which is the charcoal brick. And that brick encompasses the entire first level and actually goes up 2 stories high at this portion of the entry. Now you can start to see those tapered post bases, how even when they were thinner, they're still tapered. And we double up the columns at the entry, more for effect than structure. And you can see the combination now of the brick, the shingle, the board and batten, the multi-pane windows. Here's the 4th floor extending out over the 3rd floor. and very strong building form. And closing in on a little more of a real shot and perspective and showing you the considerable amount of landscaping and terracing that we have back from the sidewalk. This is from the north, looking down the sidewalk. And the alley and the 10-foot landscaping strip between the asphalt of the alley and the face of the building. And finally, just finishing with a color and materials board that we put together to show the quality of these materials. They kind of speak for themselves. On the right here is the stacked stone with a stone cap. The brick is a black veneer from Mutual Materials. Cedar shake is uneven. It's not straight lined and shakes. It moves, and that again gives texture to the building and is a strong arts and crafts technique. In the board and batten siding, the soffits under the pitched roofs and at the any of the areas that stick out over below have natural tongue and groove cedar and asphalt shingles in a midnight black. And I think that's my last shot. I hope I did that in a reasonable time frame. I'm happy to answer any questions now or later in the presentation.
Thanks, Gary. Do we have any questions for the applicant? David?
Well, I got some questions just on the engineering side of things, but nothing for the architectural. It's a good-looking building.
Well, just to be clear here, is the applicant done with their presentation? You have 6 minutes and 20 seconds left. If you have other people testify,
Kevin's going to
let's go through them.
A few minutes, but I'm off to the side here if any questions come up.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Evan. Kevin, you're back on the clock.
Back on the clock, okay. Yeah, we don't have any additional presentation material at this point, but we do also have our engineer on board with us as well to answer any questions about engineering.
Okay, well, why don't we do this? David, why don't we hold you for last?
Good.
Okay. Kirk, do you have any questions? No. Okay. Jason?
No, sir.
Okay. Randy?
I did have a question for Mr. Reddick, I believe it is. Looking at the 4th Street front facade, if you could bring up that image again.
Sure.
Please.
Yep, we can do that. How's that?
Thank you. It's my understanding that on the south side of this facade, you will be lowering the roof by 2 feet at some point, starting from the south and going north to some degree.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense tonight, as you talk to us about this, how you're going to do that or how the final product will look as you lower the roof on the south side?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We have worked fully through that. It will be indiscernible because we're going to take a few inches out of each floor level that already is a bit excessive. We've looked at the cross section from top to bottom, and we have the ability of removing like 6 inches of floor to ceiling, floor to floor heights in each floor to make up the 2 feet that we're over.
I see. So it won't be a stair step or a graduated thing from the south.
No, it'll look exactly the same. You'd never know the difference.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
Mark, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Craig? Craig? You're muted.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Before we get to David, I've got a couple. Gary, one of the questions with fenestration, and if we could go back to those elevations again on the shared screen, you're going to have a joint at the floor line anyway, correct?
Can you repeat the question?
I said we had some questions on the south side about fenestrations. Maybe you're going to have a joint at the floor lines anyway, correct?
I'm sorry, I was sliding into the chair here. I heard you talk about the south side, which is not the elevation that's up, but.
No, but you have some big flat walls and you're going to have a joint anyway at the floor lines, correct? You're going to have a flashing or something to pick up the differential deflection between the floors.
Possibly. Right now we're showing shingles, on the, that wouldn't necessarily require flashing floor to floor.
Really? It's going to move. Well, okay.
Between the floor levels is what I'm saying. Yeah.
I was just thinking that to dress up those big flat walls, you probably have a joint there anyway. So if you wanted to dress it up with a little more something at the floor lines, that was a possibility. But yeah. That's just what I was thinking. Although my other question is, you've got a 10-foot drive space coming out of the parking garage. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you wouldn't need any enunciation there?
We have the required flattening by the time we get to, way before we get to the end of the ramp. So we pull up there and have, once the neighbor's fence can be pulled back, we have a lot of appropriate view angle, both up and down the alley.
So there's no need for a bell or a buzzer as you come out of the door?
Honestly, I don't know. We haven't taken it that far. We want to do what's necessary back there to keep it safe. And so I think if it's determined down the line by any of us, including yourselves, that as we pass a beam there and there's a buzzer or something, it gives a little bit of warning that a car is coming out of the building, we could look at that.
Okay. All right. That's all I had. David?
Jeff, I think I saw a site distance diagram. Didn't they show how they could?
There was a site distance diagram, but I was just thinking, about kids and on bikes because we used to cut alleys all the time. That's all I was.
Yeah, and I took that. I was interpreting that as your question, actually. That as maybe more people are using the alley as a pedestrian way, we want that to be safe.
Yeah, and then of course at the same time you've got those other houses and duplexes right on the other side, so a buzzer going off at 1 o'clock in the morning when you go out isn't very good either. So I as you were answering, I was thinking about that.
Yeah,
I guess that's the problem of being old. You remember what you used to do when you were a kid, and that creates a problem.
In that camp.
Yep. That's all I had, David.
Okay. I probably need to talk with your civil engineer I have some specific questions about the drainage, how you guys have thought through that.
Sure, I can answer as best I can.
I looked at the geotech report and it says that you really are kind of required to start infiltrating at about 17 feet deep on the one test where you got like 7 inches an hour. Are you with me on that or?
Yes, I am not the water resource engineer that worked on the project, but I did talk to her earlier today and she did indicate that, yeah, there was about 7.5 inches per hour for infiltration. And we are planning not full infiltration of the stormwater. We're going to infiltrate what we're able to, and then we have a detention system that will take any overflow drainage and detain it to the required design storms.
Well, the storm drainage report said that you're going to infiltrate 100% of the 10-year storm. That's what that would.
Okay, I would have to check with our water resource engineer and get back to you on that question.
So you couldn't tell me how deep that drywall's got to be, because if the geotech report says you can only start infiltrating at 17 feet deep, you can imagine how deep a 4-foot diameter drywall's got to be to drain the entire 10-year storm on the whole building. That's a deep dry well. Anyways, if you don't have them there, I seldom have my counterpart that I can speak to at these hearings, which is a source of frustration for me.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know that much detail to be able to answer that question specifically on the depth of the dry well. Other than we were proposing a dry well, and it has the treatment cartridges as part of the dry well, and then a detention system that would be detaining the storms to the 2, 5, and 10-year events, and then discharge that to the public storm drain in the alley.
Okay. Now you do know that the existing site is 100% paved. The pre-developed condition.
Yes, we've looked at that.
And the proposed site is the exact same amount of impervious surface as the existing site.
That's
correct.
I don't know the numbers, but probably pretty close.
Probably. And so detention is still required, in your opinion?
I would have to go back and talk to our engineer on that. She did the modeling that shows what is needed for detaining to match the pre and post development storms.
Well, I just, if you were just to pipe all the roof out into the existing storm pipe, it would be no difference today, in the future, than it is today. I'm just trying to suggest maybe there's a lot of money to be saved here. And I also want to suggest that, because I'd like to see people put money into things that actually have some function to it, like a nicer building and things like that. But let me say something else, that if you can infiltrate the 10-year storm in one dry well, then I would think that would achieve detention and you wouldn't need those big detention pipes. But again, that's not your area. Okay.
It's not. When I talked to her earlier today, she had said that the one dry well did not have the capacity to infiltrate all of the stormwater runoff. And so that's the reason why we have the detention.
Right. But
to supplement dry well.
In terms of mitigating any difference between the pre and post developed conditions, that dry well should achieve that without any additional detention. So I'm just, it doesn't make sense to me. And then the other thing is if you look at the utility plan, it looks like, no one, and I when I see a future project from you, I'd like to see a little bit more detail of how the drainage is going to work. Because if you look at the plan as it's presented, the grading plan, it looks like all that landscaping in the back alley plus the flat landing area is going to drain right down the new driveway underneath the building. So everything that falls as rain on those flat and landscape areas will drain into the building. There's no real catch basin or any kind of collection system there. And I'd hate to have you guys pump all the rainwater out of the bottom of your building, So I just, it just lacks detail. I know that somebody is probably going to put in a trench drain or something like that to fix it, but anyway, but that wasn't your area, right, Kristen? You're the civil engineer here? Or?
I'm the civil engineer. I looked at the grading and the water and sewer services, and we had another engineer who worked on the storm drain. And that kind of details that you're talking about with the grading and managing the drainage, those can be worked through during final design.
Well, I want to make sure
that we don't have issues.
I just want to make sure that I see it today because, it may have an impact on changing the design because something may be infeasible, and it would have an impact on how the whole building looks. And that's why I ask these questions. I just want to make sure that it's, you got your design developed well enough where all the fatal flaws are worked out. And then we can safely decide on a project that we think is going to look the way it shows on paper.
So if I may interrupt, Chair, I just want to point the commission to the fact that the city's contract engineer did review their stormwater plan and did find it feasible with the conditions outlined in the staff report. So final design will be accomplished as a part of the building permit review.
Yeah, Joanna, she wasn't here tonight though to answer my question. So I
Correct.
disagree with
But
her
again, you know, as we say, this is the point where we check for feasibility, not for final design.
Right, and that's what I'm looking at right now. This
And-
infiltration is not feasible.
Well, I guess I would add, the question is whether the design as presented shows feasibility. Now, it could be that there is a different way to do things, and I think, Mr. Polson, you're suggesting maybe they don't need to do quite as much as they're doing. The question is going to be, that would be reviewed at final design in order to make sure that they meet the standards by the engineering department. If, and this is your question to the applicant, basically, if the applicant is concerned that something might have to change that would affect the design, then they might want to take a pause and take a look at it and come back on it. But if they want to take the risk that says whatever we do on the stormwater is not going to affect the design that you're approving, so there's no change there, then the commission would be going ahead and approving. The question is whether, you know, if it's overkill, it meets the criteria, but there's a risk to the applicant. Then if they change the design later, then they'd have to come back.
Yeah, I guess I'm hung up on trying to save money. You know, excuse me for. You know,
No, I don't.
If I don't get these comments in now, they'll
Right.
never be made.
And you've made the comments, but the money that the developer can save is not,
I
of course, part of the
understand.
criteria.
I understand.
Yeah.
But in responding as part of the applicant team, I would say that those are very good comments and definitely worthwhile on the part of the applicant team. We would like this project to move forward, but we will go back and look at this based on your comments, Commissioner Polson, to see if there might be some alternative design. We're willing to take the risk as it stands right now, the way it's designed, but if there's enough of a cost savings along those lines, then we will take another look at it. But we're willing to take that risk right now and stick with the existing design. But your comments are definitely appreciated. I know we'll go back, Kristen and I will go back and we'll talk with the stormwater engineer and also share those comments with that person about a more detailed report as well, because that was also part of your comments.
Well, I do sit on the commission, not just to try to interpret the code. It's my job, but I also, you know, do it for the community. And, you know, if there's ways that we could put more money into things that people enjoy and less money into things that don't really serve any function, then, you know, I just feel it's, I have a little bit of a forum here to do that. So.
Yeah. And again, I think the comments are appreciated. I mean, you know, if there's a way to save money on a project, I know the developers, I see them nodding their heads going, yeah, if there's a way to save some money, let's look at it. So the comments are definitely well appreciated.
Right. Well, I've been in your chair for all my career as a private consultant. So, you know, we understand each other.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
All right. Thank you. So now we go to the public side of the testimony. Kat, do we have anybody signed up to testify? Either for or against?
We have Carol, who I believe would like to testify.
Is she for or against?
Good evening, Chair Scherer. I am for.
Okay.
Okay. Carol Okert, 910 Cumberland Road, and I'm testifying this evening on behalf of the Fan Forest Hills Neighborhood Association Board in my role as Land Use Liaison. During our December 2nd board meeting, the Fan Forest Hills Board voted unanimously to support the 4th Street condo project as presented in the material before you, with the conditions of approval that staff has noted in their report. There are 3 areas of particular importance to Fan Forest Hills that I want to highlight in my testimony: trees, building height, and parking. Number 1, I start first with trees. We recognize that in this instance, there is no alternative to removing the 5 trees. So tonight we support the applicant's request to remove the trees and accept that the mitigation plan, as directed by staff, is the best outcome for the city. We do, however, want to call your attention to 2 large, significant Douglas firs that are on 515 5th Street, the lot that is on the far side of the alley behind the project site. The tree closest to the alley is an amazingly large Doug fir in our downtown core. We want to be sure that these 2 trees are protected during the construction of the project. There will be alley disturbance, and greatest care must be taken by the developer not to harm the root structure of these 2 trees, in addition to protecting the tree canopy. Number 2, height. As noted in item A, 2D of the staff conditions, the height of the north-south main gable must be modified to comply with our 60-foot height limitation. It is a priority to Fan Forest Hills to maintain compliance with code, and the developer has indicated that they can indeed comply. Number 3, and finally, parking. As we develop our downtown core, we want to be sure that projects meet code required parking. We want a vibrant downtown that accommodates EC zone use without spilling parking into the close-in residential neighborhoods. Item A 2B of the staff conditions of approval directs that there be a parking stall in the parking garage made available for visitor parking, in addition to the 4 parking spaces indicated in front of the condominiums on 4th Street across from the post office. We understand that the developer will meet this condition and comply with the 25% visitor parking requirement. But I need to ask the DRC for your attention and assistance with an unforeseen anomaly with our Land Use Code 50 and parking rules. As you know, developments in the EC zone can count street spaces toward their code required parking minimums. But those same on-street spaces that are used to comply with standard parking for residents in apartments might be limited to 15-minute parking. Both Attorney Boone and Director Siegel agree that parking and DRD code language is silent on this issue. Staff explained that code cares about dimensions on the street. With that logic, perhaps it doesn't even matter if the sign on that street says no parking. This may have been workable before living in the EC zone became normalized, but now we need code that deals with the current reality of condos and apartments in the EC zone. Sometime within the next 6 months to a year, an application is likely to be submitted in part to develop more than 60 apartments with parking on busy B Street and First Avenue, counted to meet code minimums. But how will the parking on the streets be signposted? Currently, staff does not feel that code should be interpreted to exclude time-limited on-street parking towards basic required parking for residential living. Common sense and good practice says we need to address this code anomaly before more projects come before the DRC and you are left without recourse. That the DRC would approve parking on a street that could be posted 15-minute parking or no parking before the project is even built is actually kind of ridiculous. There needs to be code language that directs parking designated for residential development to be posted accordingly. Please convey your desire to staff to address this code parking catch-22. Fortunately tonight, the developer has exceeded code required parking by 10 spaces. So I am bringing this parking anomaly to your attention proactively. As I've already heard this evening, you serve on this commission for community benefit, and I do appreciate that. In summary, Fan Forest Hills Board sees this as a quality project for our EC zone and lends our support in concurrence with the staff conditions of approval. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Carol. Any questions for Carol? Seeing none. Kat, do we have anybody else for public testimony?
No, we do not.
Okay. Evan? You're muted.
Thank you. All right, so this would be the time, well, even though the applicant has tested, or even though we had testimony in favor, does the applicant have any, if there's any items in there in that statement that the applicant feels they should rebut, this would time to be rebutting the testimony by the first edition Forest Heights.
No, nothing to add.
Okay.
We appreciate Carol. We appreciate her comments. We appreciate working with her throughout this project.
All right, prior to closing the public hearing, any person may request an opportunity to present additional evidence. If a request is made, the public hearing shall be either continued to a date certain, not less than 7 days later, or the record shall remain open for at least 7 days after the hearing to enable additional written evidence or testimony to be submitted, and the commission will establish a period for any rebuttal written evidence to be submitted. Ms. Okert, do you wish the record to be left open?
I do not.
All right. Kat, was there anybody who contacted you that requested the record be left open?
No.
All right. Thank you. Then unless waived by the applicant, the commission would allow the applicant at least 7 days after the record is closed to all other parties to submit final written argument in support of the application. This information would be considered part of the record, but would not include any new evidence. So I asked the applicant, do you want to submit final written argument, which would delay the commission's deliberation and decision on your application until the next meeting? Or do you want the commission to deliberate and decide the issue based upon the evidence and argument they've received?
We'd like the latter, to deliberate and make a decision this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you may proceed with deliberation.
Thank you. Okay, guys, what are your thoughts? Randy?
Thank you. I just had a question of staff on the parking requirements. As I understood it, I recall staff saying with modifiers, the parking for this site was reduced to 17 required parking spaces. 27 were to be provided. Could you clarify what modifiers resulted in the 17 required spaces which have been exceeded? What modifiers?
So in the downtown redevelopment design district. I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit, Commissioner Arthur. Can you read
what were the modifiers that resulted in the 17 requirement, which I understand the applicant has exceeded? I'm just wondering what specific modifiers applied here, just for my own edification.
Okay. So in the downtown redevelopment design district, because of the availability of on-street parking, there is a standard 25% reduction. So with the 15 units in the distribution of bedrooms, originally 22 spaces were required. And then with the parking modifier for DRD, it was reduced to 17 spaces, rounded up.
So it was just the presence of on-street parking that ended up with the 17.
The parking standards for any site that's in a specific area that's shown in the DRD, the standard parking modifier is 25%, a reduction of 25%, and that applies to any use.
To be clear then, Johanna, there's a 25% reduction because it's in downtown. Plus, in this part of downtown, you can count on-street parking against that number as well.
Correct. Yeah, and that is unique to the downtown. So there's, like I said in my presentation, there are 4 on-street parking spaces. They are timed right now, I think a 2-hour time limit. But as Ms. Ockert pointed out, the code is silent both in the parking standards and the DRD on whether or not you can use timed on-street parking spaces, or if you're obliged to not count them if they are timed. The code is silent currently. So the applicant is providing 23 spaces on site with an additional 4 on the street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could interject something, I read in one of the exhibits today that was given to us today that one of the concerns was post office employees using that on-street parking, when they get to work early in the morning. Now, I don't know if anybody has any comment about that. I don't have no idea if it's true or not, or if that would conflict with the natural use of the new condo.
The code is silent on whether or not a parking space is used by someone on the site. An on-street parking space is used by someone on the site or by someone in the general public. They are public parking spaces. Again, the on-site parking does more than meet the minimum parking requirements. So those 4 on-street parking spaces are bonus, if you will.
Okay, but that.
And I would just emphasize, the parking spaces don't belong to the development, to the fronting property. They are public parking spaces. What we are applying here is we have a minimum parking standard, so based upon the number of bedrooms. Then we look to whether or not reductions apply. The code says reductions apply because it's in downtown, and the code also says if there's parking spaces that front on the property, we reduce that number. There's no time. We don't care who parks there. They may not be able to park in front, but based upon the location and the code requirements, the code requirements say based upon the location, they're entitled to those 2 reductions.
Well, to Carol's point, though, she was concerned about the bleeding of parking into the more residential neighborhoods of the first edition.
Right.
And if those spaces are occupied, which it would only make sense that they would be for post office employees, then again, this is not a code issue. I understand, but it's a quality issue and it's a qualitative thing, and I don't see it's inappropriate to talk about it right now.
And as Ms. Ockert indicated, that's certainly an item for code analysis, for code modification. And if the DRC wishes to comment to the Planning Commission on that item, that's fine.
Okay,
that would be appropriate.
I would certainly support that if the other commission members agreed to it, to refer that item to the Planning Commission for analysis, the item being whether there should be residential, a designation of residential parking for those 4 spaces or for other spaces where a modifier applies that allows public parking spaces to be included in the parking requirement. I would certainly favor referring that to the Planning Commission.
I would agree with that, both not just in first edition, but also in Lake Grove. Jessica, another one of our letters to the Planning Commission.
Yeah, we can talk about that more after this hearing during the management update.
Okay, very good. Gentlemen, any other discussion on this proposal?
Well, I like it. I mean, It's a beautiful architectural design. I think it does meet the craftsman style really well. And I know there's been concern about the height, that it's maximizing the allowable height, but that's what the code says, and you got to expect people to try to fully utilize their property. So, but I think it's a really nice looking building.
Anybody else?
Well, I too think it is a very aesthetically pleasing building, certainly from the front 4th Street elevation, facade, and as appears being viewed from the alley. As I understand it, they're not requesting any variances, and they're not totally covering all the lot, as I understand it, for the lot coverage, which they could have 100%. Sounds to me like they've exceeded slightly the landscape area requirement in front. I like the shed dormers that help de-emphasize the 4th floor. I did have a little concern about parking, but I do appreciate that the applicant has worked with the neighborhood association. I appreciated Ms. Okert's testimony relating to the parking and the trees. So I certainly will be voting in favor of the application.
Thank you. Kirk?
So when I reviewed this staff report, I kept looking for things that were going to need variances or conditions of approval, and I didn't see any. So as a real estate attorney, I just kind of ran the code and thought this project complies with the code. I guess this one little glitch, I guess, was the 2 feet from 62 to 60, but the applicant is addressing that. So, and then one thing I thought I might hear from the community was, the massing, because of, 60 feet, but we didn't hear that. So based on the fact of the project meeting the code, I'm going to vote to approve it based on the fact that it's a great looking building, and it follows the code, and that's our job to interpret the code. So that's what I'm going to do. So.
Okay. Mark?
Couldn't agree more with the comments of my colleagues. This was, in my estimation, one of the easier projects to contemplate because it's prepared so well. Thank you.
Craig?
Yeah, I agree with Kurt, some of his comments. I expected scale might have been an issue. I think it's the ratio, how it jumps from the buildings next door is a little bit excessive, but that's a code thing. It's in code. So I'm definitely going to vote for it. It's a great looking building. They worked with everybody in the neighborhood. I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm in agreement.
Thank you. Jason?
I'll go ahead and take it one step forward further and just say I would move to approve this based off of as written.
That's conditioned in the staff report.
Correct.
Seconded.
Thank you. Kat, would you poll the council?
Chair,
Yes.
Polson,
Yes.
Berardi,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Frankel,
Yes.
Silent,
Yes.
Arthur.
Yes.
All right, this was a tentative decision by the commission to approve, and the findings will be brought back to the commission on the 21st of December at 7 p.m. I'm looking at Jessica nodding yes or no, or 6.
Commissioners, we do not have any other items scheduled for the 21st. So if you wanted to hold the meeting earlier, then we would be able to do that.
I can do it anytime. It's up to what works best for everyone else.
Earlier is fine.
6 o'clock would be great.
6 o'clock work for everybody?
Yes.
You'll send us a notice, correct? Okay, very good.
So this is continued to the 21st at 6 p.m. for consideration of findings.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, Chair, and Commission.
Thank you. Well, we'll move on to the next order of business, except I want to say, geez, Rick, I wish I could go shoot with you. Okay, so we are continued with the LU 2030 until January 4th. So now we go to schedule review and management update. Jessica?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we have 2 items scheduled on January 4th as of right now. One is an appeal of a minor partition in the Forest Highlands neighborhood, and then the other is the item that was continued that you just mentioned. We also have one item for the second meeting in January, which I want to note is on a Wednesday because our normal date falls on the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. So I believe it's the 20th. We have a tree appeal to review. So thing to look forward to in January. On the 21st, as we already mentioned, we just have the findings. So before we adjourn, is there any more discussion on the recommendation that the commission wants to make to the Planning Commission to address on-street parking? And this is the issue of counting the parking, the on-street parking towards the parking requirement in the DRD, particularly when the parking is time limited. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Well,
my own opinion is I think they got to look at that, and with as much delivery people we're seeing, UPS, FedEx, Amazon, it's almost like that parking should be, saved for that during the working day, and then, for the neighborhood afterwards, or for the neighborhood, and the development shouldn't be able to count that 25% because the parking is tough. This site that we approved tonight, I was down there going to the post office, and I had one heck of a time finding a place to park in a 2-block area down there. And that's prior to this, just on the street. Now, I don't know if they're postal employees but the UPS trucks are parking in the middle of the street. I think that the planning commission really needs to take a look at this 25% write down for street parking. My own opinion. I don't know how you guys feel.
Well, I just want them to resolve if there's a natural contradiction where, a multifamily project has the ability to account for their parking requirements through some public street parking.
I don't like that.
And then, well, I mean, that's what the code says. And maybe in some cases it's a perfectly feasible way to go. But in this case, when there's other commercial conflicts with it, I mean, or timed parking or something like that, the code certainly should be made aware or be considered to resolve any contradictions there.
Well, I don't like having that 25% write down in there because it certainly wasn't good in Lake Grove. I think if you're gonna build a project, a condo project, apartment project, you ought to be able to park it.
Well, in this case, they did, right?
In this case, they did.
Yeah, but I'm saying, other place they ought to be able to park it.
Yeah, you gotta be able to park it.
Right, and if they use on-street parking, that on-street parking is used up or limited, and they get to count it anyway. And I just think the planning commission should be, if that is truly what goes on, then you got to bring that to their attention.
Either way, we need to update our parking code in the city. We're in a new age with online delivery, and you got multiple trucks, and if you're in a downtown area like that, it's just getting to the point where we really got to update it before there's additional development.
So my 2 cents on this is, since I've been on the commission, my opinion is every project should be parked pursuant to the code. And I've never liked the idea that you could use public parking as part of your counts for the project. There's another application in which, we're trying to figure out what kind of use it is based on, so we can figure out how many parking spots are supposed to be for the project. So either you park your project based on what the code says, or you don't. But the idea that you're going to use, public parking as part of your counts, I just never have liked that concept. That's my own personal. So,
well, if it's a purely retail center, and they're going to have some on-street parking to serve it, then that's okay, right? But if it's a multifamily or residential use, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Mr. Boone, has the Planning Commission, I know they're working on their goal setting. Do you know if they've finalized their goals or if they've discussed them already?
I think they've had 2 work sessions on them, but they have not finalized them yet. Okay.
So this might be a good time to bring this issue before them because they are going to be discussing their goal setting for 2021. I will go ahead and draft something up and the commission can review it at the December 21st hearing.
Okay. Very good.
Meeting. Okay.
Very good.
Okay.
Jessica, I got a quick question.
Mhm.
Is there a team or anyone that goes through the code and kind of goes through it and say, ooh, this is something we need to update? How's that work in the city?
Yeah, so we have an annual code amendment process, which is basically housekeeping items. We also will flag items, and they can come from staff, they can come from neighborhoods. There's various ways in which we flag particular areas that may need attention. But when we're talking about big policy issues, you know, those are generally going to be raised by neighborhood associations or the council. Unless staff finds a problem in implementing in the code. In this case, with the parking code, it's not hard to implement. The question is just a policy question of whether we should do it. So that's not something that staff would necessarily bring forward.
Okay.
Any other comments? Any other business? Okay. Evan, Jessica, if we don't have anything else, I think we're adjourned.
We are.
Good night.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Everybody.
Thanks, Kat. You did a great job. Good night.
Good night.